My name is Allison Grant, and if someone had told me that the woman who smiled at me on my wedding day would one day become the biggest threat to my future, I would have laughed. I believed kindness was always genuine. I believed family meant safety, and I believed the man I married would protect me from anything. I was wrong. The worst betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from inside my own home. Before this story ends, you'll understand why I lost almost everything, and why the people who tried to destroy my life ended up losing far more than they ever imagined. So if you've ever trusted the wrong person, stay with me, because what happened next still gives me chills. I was 29 years old, living in Austin, Texas, when I met Steve Smith. Steve was kind, successful, and unlike anyone I'd dated before. On our third date, he looked at me and said, "There's something you deserve to know before this relationship goes any further." He told me he had been married before. He and his former wife, Rebecca Smith, had divorced years earlier. They shared custody of their young son, Noah. Then Steve said something that erased my fears. "Rebecca knows about us. She wants both of us to move on peacefully. She even said she'd rather Noah grow up surrounded by people who care about him than by bitterness." That sounded incredibly mature. When I finally met Rebecca, she hugged me. She smiled warmly. She even thanked me for being kind to Noah. In that moment, I thought I had won the family lottery. I had no idea. Some smiles hide secrets. Some kindness is only a mask. And some people are willing to wait patiently before making their move. A few months after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. Steve cried when we saw the positive test. It felt like our little family was finally becoming complete. But from that day forward, small things began happening. Things I couldn't explain, and I didn't realize someone was quietly trying to turn my happiest moment into my worst nightmare. The first few months of my pregnancy felt like a dream. Steve became even more caring than before. Every morning he made sure I ate breakfast. Every evening he'd place his hand on my stomach and whisper, "I can't wait to meet our little one." Watching him smile made me believe I had chosen the right man. Rebecca continued acting like the perfect ex-wife. She often stopped by with homemade meals. She'd ask how I was feeling and tell me pregnancy was exhausting. Sometimes she'd even insist on helping around the house. "Your family, Allison," she'd say with a warm smile. I never questioned her kindness. Her younger sister, Rachel Collins, lived in the neighboring unit with Steve's younger brother, Daniel Smith. Rachel and Rebecca were inseparable. They spent hours together almost every day. Whenever I walked into a room, their conversations would suddenly stop. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking. One evening, while Steve was working late, Rebecca brought me a glass of warm milk. "It'll help you sleep," she said. I smiled and thanked her. But before I could take a sip, my phone rang. It was my mother, Linda Grant. We talked for nearly 20 minutes. By the time I returned to the kitchen, the milk had gone cold. I poured it down the sink and made myself fresh tea instead. The next morning, Rebecca seemed strangely disappointed. "You didn't drink the milk?" she asked. "No, it got cold," I replied. For just a split second, the smile disappeared from her face. Then it came back. "Oh, that's okay." It was such a small moment, but something about it stayed with me. A week later, Rachel invited me shopping for baby clothes. She was unusually generous. She insisted on buying tiny blue baby outfits. "I just have a feeling it's going to be a boy," she laughed. Her words surprised me. We hadn't told anyone the baby's gender yet. I looked at her. "How did you know?" Rachel froze. Then she quickly laughed it off. "Just a lucky guess." I smiled, but inside something didn't feel right. A few days later, I had my routine prenatal appointment with Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Everything looked healthy. The baby's heartbeat was strong. As we were leaving, the doctor pulled Steve aside. "Your wife needs to avoid unnecessary stress and only take medications prescribed by us," she said firmly. Steve nodded. Of course. Neither of us imagined how important those words would become, because only days later, I would collapse in unbearable pain, and that terrifying moment would expose a secret someone had worked very hard to keep hidden. 3 days after my appointment with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Steve had to leave early for an important business meeting. Before leaving, he kissed my forehead. "I'll be home by dinner. Call me if you need anything." I smiled. "I will." Around noon, Rebecca knocked on my door carrying a small tray. "You shouldn't skip lunch," she said. "I made your favorite soup." She looked so caring that I felt guilty for ever doubting her. We sat together and talked about the baby. She asked if we had picked a name. She smiled when I said we were still deciding. As she was leaving, she handed me a glass of warm milk. "The doctor said you need calcium. Drink this before you take your afternoon nap." I thanked her. Nothing about her behavior seemed unusual. I drank the milk. Less than an hour later, a sharp pain shot through my stomach. At first, I thought it was just normal pregnancy discomfort, but within minutes, the pain became unbearable. My hands started shaking. I could barely breathe. I called Steve with trembling fingers. "Steve, something's wrong." He didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way. Don't move." By the time he arrived, I was curled up on the floor, crying in pain. He rushed me to St. David's Medical Center in Austin. Doctors immediately began examining me. Steve waited outside the room, terrified. After what felt like forever, Dr. Sarah Mitchell walked out with a serious expression. "Your baby still has a heartbeat, which is good news," she said. Steve let out a breath of relief, but the doctor continued. "However, Allison's symptoms don't match a normal pregnancy complication. We'd like to run additional tests to find out what caused this sudden reaction." Steve looked confused. "Are you saying something else may have happened?" The doctor answered carefully. "I can't draw conclusions yet. We need the test results first." Those words sent a chill through both of us. That evening, while I rested in my hospital room, Steve replayed every detail of the day in his mind. Then he asked me one simple question: "What did you eat before the pain started?" I told him about the soup and the glass of milk Rebecca had brought. Steve went silent. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear in his eyes. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't jump to conclusions. But he quietly asked the hospital staff to preserve the remaining food and drink for testing, just in case. Neither of us knew what the results would show. But deep down, we both realized that this might not have been an accident, and if someone had truly tried to harm me, the truth was about to change our family forever. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Steve talking quietly in the hallway. His voice was calm, but I could hear the worry behind every word. When he walked into my room, he forced a smile. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," I whispered. He held my hand tightly. "The baby is still doing well. That's all that matters right now." I nodded, trying to stay positive. A few hours later, Dr. Sarah Mitchell entered the room carrying a folder. She closed the door before speaking. "The tests didn't show a normal pregnancy complication," she explained carefully. "They suggest Allison came into contact with a substance that should never be taken during pregnancy." The room fell silent. Steve stared at the doctor. "Are you saying someone gave it to her?" Dr. Mitchell shook her head. "I can't say that. The results only tell us the substance entered her body. We don't know how or by whom." That answer was enough to make us realize this couldn't be ignored. Steve immediately began thinking back over the last few weeks. Who had been around Allison? Who had prepared her food? Who had access to the house? Then one memory hit him: the glass of milk. Back home, Steve quietly checked the kitchen security camera that covered the shared hallway outside our entrance. It didn't show what happened inside our home, but it did show who entered. The footage revealed Rebecca walking in carrying a tray. A few minutes later, Rachel arrived. The two sisters stayed inside together for nearly 20 minutes before leaving. Steve frowned. Rachel had never mentioned visiting that afternoon. Why? Still, the video proved nothing. It only raised more questions. That evening, Rebecca came to the hospital carrying flowers. She smiled warmly. "I was so worried about you, Allison." Before I could answer, Steve spoke. "Where were you yesterday after you left our apartment?" Rebecca looked surprised. "Why?" "Just answer the question." For the first time, her smile disappeared. She quickly said she had gone back to her own apartment and spent the afternoon with Rachel. Steve didn't argue. He simply nodded. But after Rebecca left, he turned to me. Something isn't right. The next morning, an unexpected phone call changed everything. A pharmacist contacted the hospital after reviewing recent prescription records connected to the family. There were irregularities that investigators wanted to understand. No one was accusing anyone yet, but the questions were becoming impossible to ignore. And for the first time, Rebecca realized the truth she had tried so hard to hide might finally be catching up with her. 3 days later, Detective Michael Reed called us again. His voice was calm, but this time it carried a sense of urgency. "Mrs. Grant, we've spoken to someone who may have important information. We'd like you and your husband to come to the station tomorrow morning." Neither Steve nor I slept much that night. We didn't know what to expect. The next morning, we arrived at the police station hand in hand. Detective Reed led us into a small interview room. A woman was already sitting there. She looked nervous. The moment Rebecca's name was mentioned, she lowered her eyes. "My name is Karen Ellis," she said quietly. "I work at the pharmacy where Rebecca filled one of her prescriptions a few weeks ago." Karen explained that Rebecca had asked several unusual questions about medications and whether certain prescriptions could be detected in routine medical tests. At the time, Karen hadn't thought much of it. But after hearing that detectives were asking questions about Allison's sudden medical emergency, she felt she had a responsibility to come forward. Detective Reed thanked her. "Your statement doesn't prove a crime," he explained, "but it may help us understand the timeline." Karen nodded. "That's why I'm here. I just wanted to tell the truth." Later that afternoon, investigators interviewed Rebecca again. This time, they compared her latest statement with what she had said during the first interview. Several details didn't match. When they asked about the afternoon she visited Allison, Rebecca hesitated. She insisted she had only stayed for a few minutes, but the security footage showed she had remained much longer. Rachel's account was also inconsistent. Neither inconsistency proved wrongdoing, but together, they raised more questions. That evening, Steve and I sat quietly on our back porch. The sunset painted the Texas sky orange and gold. Steve looked at me. "No matter how long this takes, I'm not giving up." I leaned my head on his shoulder. For weeks, fear had controlled my life. Now, for the first time, hope was stronger than fear. A month later, our baby was healthy and growing well. Dr. Sarah Mitchell smiled during the ultrasound. "Your little boy is doing great," she said. I couldn't hold back my tears. After everything we'd been through, hearing those words felt like a miracle, but while our family was finally beginning to heal, the investigation was reaching its conclusion, and soon every piece of evidence would be placed together. When the truth finally came out, no one in the Smith family would ever be the same again. Almost 4 months had passed since the day I was rushed to the hospital. Life had started to feel normal again. My pregnancy was healthy, Steve never left my side, and every doctor visit reminded us how lucky we were that our son was still growing strong. Then, one Friday morning, Detective Michael Reed called. "Mrs. Grant, we've completed the investigation. We'd like you and Mr. Smith to come in today." Steve looked at me. Neither of us spoke during the drive. The silence said everything. Inside the station, Detective Reed placed a thick file on the table. "This case was built from many small pieces," he said. No single fact told the whole story, but together, they created a clear picture. He explained that investigators had compared interview statements, pharmacy records, security footage, and witness accounts. Several statements made by Rebecca and Rachel contradicted one another. The timeline they described didn't match the available evidence. When confronted with those inconsistencies, Rachel eventually admitted that she and Rebecca had agreed to hide parts of what happened that afternoon because they feared being blamed. She also admitted they had secretly hoped Allison's pregnancy would fail because they believed a new baby would permanently change the family and reduce Rebecca's influence over Steve's life. Detective Reed paused. Jealousy and resentment can push people to make terrible decisions. Hearing those words broke my heart. I had treated Rebecca like family. I had trusted her completely. Rebecca was later charged based on the evidence gathered during the investigation, while Rachel also faced legal consequences for her role in misleading investigators. As they were escorted out of the courtroom, Rebecca looked at me with tears in her eyes. For a moment, I expected another excuse, another lie. Instead, she whispered, "I destroyed my own life." I didn't answer. Some apologies come too late. A few weeks later, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. The first time Steve held him, tears streamed down his face. "Welcome to the world, little one," he whispered. Watching them together healed a part of me that I thought had been lost forever. I realized that revenge wasn't about hatred. It wasn't about making someone suffer. The greatest revenge was living the happy life they tried to take away. 5 years passed. Sometimes I still thought about everything that had happened, not because I wanted revenge, but because I never wanted to forget the lesson it taught me. Our son, Liam Smith, was now a happy, energetic little boy. Every morning, he would run into our bedroom shouting, "Mom! Dad, wake up!" His laughter filled our home with the kind of joy I once thought I'd lost forever. Steve had changed too. After everything we'd survived, our marriage became stronger than ever. He often told me, "The day I almost lost both of you was the day I realized what truly mattered." Those words meant more to me than any apology ever could. As for Rebecca, her choices had cost her dearly. She lost the trust of almost everyone around her. Even people who had once defended her slowly walked away after learning the full truth. She eventually wrote me a letter. It wasn't a request for forgiveness. It simply said, "Every day I think about the family I destroyed. I blamed everyone else for my pain until I realized I had created it myself. If I could go back, I would choose kindness instead of jealousy." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't hate her anymore, but forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. Some wounds heal, yet the scars remain. Rachel also faced the consequences of her decisions. She and Daniel eventually separated after years of broken trust. Daniel later admitted, "The hardest part wasn't losing a marriage. It was realizing I ignored the warning signs because I didn't want to believe someone I loved could make such terrible choices." One evening, Steve and I sat on our porch watching Liam ride his little bicycle. The sun was setting over our neighborhood in Austin. Steve smiled. "If you could change the past, would you?" I watched our son laughing, then I shook my head. "No." "Why?" he asked. I smiled through tears. "Because if the past had been different, this little boy might never have been here." Steve reached for my hand. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Final message to the audience. If there's one thing my story taught me, it's this. Not everyone who smiles at you is happy for you. Not everyone who calls you family wants the best for you. Trust should be earned, not assumed. And no matter how dark life becomes, the truth has a way of finding the light. My name is Allison Grant. This is the story of how betrayal nearly destroyed my future. But faith, love, and truth gave me a new beginning.